Good morning. Today is the first day of my first reading vlog and reading challenge because in this essay I will be reading 5 books recommended by Black celebrities whose work I enjoy and admire. I chose 5 as opposed to 7 because I did not want to hate myself, and I still haven't dropped out of grad school yet. Imagine that. So I have a lot of other reading to do this week. I'm doing this because frankly I think it'll be fun and I hope it'll kind of buoy my mood a bit, help raise my spirits because your girl has been going through it. Let the church say amen. Okay, so the first celebrity who I wanted to read a book that they enjoyed was Serena Williams. Now, she is the greatest athlete of our time. Tom Brady can take several seats, 4 Olympic gold medals, 23 Grand Slam singles titles, winning the Australian Open while 2 months pregnant. What? On top of that, being a mother and fashion designer and wife and entrepreneur. And the book that she recommended was Who Moved My Cheese? Now, this is actually a book I had read a few years ago and was heavily underwhelmed. It's this kind of business motivational speaking fable in which you have these groups of mice in a maze who all react differently when their cheese gets moved. It talks about strategy and motivation and really adapting to change and kind of overcoming that. I barely remember the book, so I'm looking forward to rereading it, and my hopes are that maybe at this point in my life, it'll hit me a little different, and I can hopefully see, based on what I know of Serena's life and career, what appealed to her about this text. The next celebrity for whom I wanted to read a recommendation for was Levar Burton, You may know him as playing Kunta Kinte in Roots, as one of the main characters on Star Trek Next Generation, or you were introduced to him the same way I was, which is as the host of Reading Rainbow. He held that job for 23 years, and it was one of my favorite shows growing up. So of course, given his Reading Rainbow history, he chose a children's book, and that is Enemy Pie. Now, I actually bought this book over a year ago as a potential idea for it to be adapted into a children's play. And again, I've read it, but it's been so long that I barely remember what it's about. So I'm looking forward to reintroducing myself to it. The basic plot is about a young boy who has his enemy in the neighborhood, this other kid he does not like, and the way his father teaches him to not only empathize with other people, learn to forgive, but also that your enemies can potentially be your friends if you give them a chance and find common ground. I think this is going to be like a really soothing, gentle story that will hopefully bring me a little bit of hope given our certain era of division. But also, this is an author and an illustrator who I'm not very familiar with. If you looked at my collection of children's books, you would see a trend, you would see a theme among some of the authors and illustrators, and I tend to pull from sources and resources that I loved when I was a kid. I haven't really been keeping as up to date on newer children's books, except for things like, Julian is a Mermaid and Sulwe. So I'm also excited to try that book. The next celebrity from whom I got a recommendation, every time I say this, I say it equally as awkward. I need to figure out my phrasing, is Gabrielle Union. Now, Gabrielle Union is not one of my favorite actors of all time, but I feel like she has kind of been a part of my cinematic coming of age, because whether it was Bring It On or 10 Things I Hate About You, Daddy's Little Girl, Think Like a Man, like she's been in so much stuff that I've enjoyed and that I've watched, even if I'm not the type of fan who would say, oh, Gabrielle Union is in that, I have to go see that movie. But on top of that, she's also an author. She's been a host in America's Got Talent. She's been in the game for a minute, getting her coin, doing her work, and I really, really like this book recommendation, and that is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Again, you're noticing a theme here. This is a book I read years and years ago, like before I probably was old enough to read it and really understand its merit, and since then I have fallen absolutely in love with the stage adaptation of the show. So I really want to be reintroduced to Alice Walker's work. I also want to know how much of the story resonates across the different mediums. The Color Purple was also famously adapted into a film directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Whoopi Goldberg, which I've never seen. So my perception of the story is solely influenced by the stage adaptation. And some things can get lost in translation during adaptation, some things can get better, some things can get worse. And I know that The Color Purple is specifically from Celie's perspective, and I think that I will really enjoy that because while I love the musical, there is a fair amount of attention played to other supporting characters, even though Celie is the main character, and sometimes I feel that some of the emotional core of who I think Celie is, again, based on my experience with the show, can get a little lost in some of the hustle and bustle of the other larger, more extroverted, outgoing personalities on stage. But Gabrielle Union is an incredibly talented woman, and I'm excited to read this recommendation from her. Next on the list, we have Childish Gambino / Donald Glover, depending on how you're familiar with him. So this gentleman is Grammy Award winning, Emmy Award winning, Golden Globe Award winning. He is the definition of a hyphenate artist as an actor, a musician / rapper, and as a stand-up comedian. Now, I will say, I am not a fan of his stand-up comedy, at least what I have watched, but as an actor and as a musician, absolutely a fan of his work. Really like the way he's been reinventing himself over the years, and I really enjoy the way that he seems to move between film and television and different styles of music. Like, I really like being able to watch someone's career evolve. Also considering how young he is, I can only imagine as an artist how much more he's going to evolve moving forward. And the book that he recommended was The Curious Incident of the Dog in Nighttime. Again, this is a book that I have not read, but I'm familiar with the story because it was adapted into a stage play. So I know that version of the story. I've never actually read the book. And so I'm excited to explore it from that lens. Also because while I was looking over books I have read recently, I don't think I've read anything that has a main character who is not neurotypical. And that's surprising to me because you'd think, considering my own background, I'd be seeking out main characters who, while I'm not on the autism spectrum, have to navigate the world a different way because of the way their brains are wired and have to adapt in new ways. And I just think that's going to be really exciting to read about. I'm really hopeful about this book. I've heard excellent things about it. And again, I am interested to compare the experience of reading the book to the experience of reading the stage play. And next we have Misty Copeland. I have a soft spot in my heart for her because my mother was a professional dancer. And Misty Copeland started dancing at 13, which is incredibly late considering how fantastic she would go on to become. And she became the first African-American principal dancer in the American Ballet Theater's company's entire 75-year history, which of course is ridiculous, but also speaks to everything that she's achieved and overcome and continues to achieve and overcome throughout her dancing career. And the book that she recommended was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Now, this is an author whose work I am familiar with only because he has been recommended by, so many celebrities and, talk show hosts. Oprah famously chose some of his books for her book club. And my dad is someone who is very into metaphysics and spirituality and those kinds of books. And I've like dipped my toe into them. I've read a couple, I've read a few, but I've never tried his work. I mean, The Power of Now, as well as A New Earth, are books that you'll probably see in every bookstore, in every, airport lounge. And it's just something that I never found myself particularly interested in. But considering what Misty said about it and how it affected her perceptions, I'm really interested to check it out. So, these are the 5 celebrities, and these are the 5 books that I will be reading this week. Please know that this is my first time doing any sort of vlogging endeavor, so lighting, sound, camera quality, physical appearance, it's all up in the air. We'll see what we get at the end of this week. Good morning. Welcome to technically day 2 of my reading challenge, but I'm calling it day 1 because life and school got in the way yesterday and I did not read. The first book on the list is Enemy Pie by Derek Munson, illustrated by Tara Calahan King. Interestingly enough, I'm an idiot and didn't notice that this was actually a Reading Rainbow book when I bought it, so no wonder Levar Burton recommended it. But I do think the messages in it align with the things that I learned from his Reading Rainbow show all those years ago. So in this book, we have this main character who has this enemy, Jeremy Ross. And now Jeremy doesn't bully him or call him names, but he didn't invite him to play on his trampoline, and he struck the main character out in a baseball game. So this young boy considers Jeremy to be his enemy and asks his dad for help. His dad creates this very delicious, amazing smelling pie called Enemy Pie, and said that if Jeremy eats it, it'll get rid of him. But the main character has to spend an entire day with Jeremy being as nice as possible. What ends up happening, of course, is Jeremy, this one's Jeremy, and our main character turn out to have a lot in common. They have a lot of fun together, they end up having a great day, and by the end of it, the main character realizes he doesn't want to get rid of Jeremy. But lo and behold, when they all have the pie, it turns out that when someone is no longer your enemy, it's just a regular delicious pie with ice cream. I thought this was a really, really cute story. I appreciated the fact that the conflict the main character had with Jeremy was really based around a lot of assumptions and misunderstandings. Striking someone out in a baseball game, I mean, that's the point of the game. And there are a lot of reasons maybe why he didn't invite him to play on his trampoline, but it just wasn't one of those stories that tries to teach kids that you have to be nice to your bullies in order to rise above it, because as someone who was bullied, I have feelings about that. I will say, though, this is not one of my favorite stories I've read. One of the reasons is that the main characters and all the other characters in the book, the other children on the baseball team, the girls in the neighborhood that they throw water balloons at, everybody is white. And I just think that was a missed opportunity for more inclusivity, even if the main character was still going to be the same race. Another thing about this book that I didn't love, though, were the illustrations. While they do have a lot of texture, I personally love the way that she paints grass. I love the texture and Jeremy's hair and the ruddiness on the cheeks of the main characters. These illustrations didn't really move me, and I know that's not a great critique. When I give feedback on books, I try to have like really specific examples, but the illustrations in children's books, for me, it is very much an emotional experience. There are some I have on my shelves where even if I don't want to read the book, I'll just open it and look at it as like an independent photo or an illustration, something that I'd want to take out of its context and frame it on a wall. And not every children's book is like that. Some books, I think the strength is actually in the writing and in the story, less so the illustrations. But this one was one in which I liked the story, but it wasn't one of my favorites. And the illustrations were lovely. Again, I said I really like the way she plays with texture, but they didn't give me that emotional catharsis, that feeling that I normally get when I look at my other children's books. So I think this was a good place to start. I think, as I said earlier, the messages of this book align with the things that Levar Burton was preaching as the host of Reading Rainbow. And I think this could be a really great book to have conversations with kids in your life about what makes an enemy, how to talk about the difference between, did that person hurt you or harm you, or are you having some other feelings about that person that you want to work through, the ways in which you might find that when you actually spend time with someone and give them a chance, that you guys are more alike than you are different. All of that is great, but this is a book I think I would rather give away and allow a child to enjoy on their own merit. It's not something I think I'm going to keep in my collection, but I am glad I reread it. The second thing I want to say that is not related to books, but kind of just this whole experiment, is that throughout this week I am going to be talking a bit about mental health because, as I said in my introductory video, I'm working through some things. I am still trying to find the balance between how vulnerable I want to be, since I am someone who has benefited from the vulnerability of other people on the internet for years, while also being mindful of just what my levels of comfort are, what my boundaries are with privacy. Something I do want to say, though, is that I'm currently filming this on March 9th. So the last three or four videos that are posted on my channel, I filmed weeks ago, actually in early February. Since then, time has passed in a way that has been challenging because I have been challenged by my emotions and my mental health. Your girl's been going through it. I cannot explain why that in 2021, I am having more issues than I was having in 2020, which is saying something, but they're here and they're real. And now that I have this online presence, it's been very, very interesting trying to figure out how I want to talk about them, how I want to deal with them, how I want to be authentic and honest while also protecting what I have. And when I say protecting, I really just mean like my peace and my privacy. So I'm filming outside because something I have found that helps me is just sitting outside for a little bit every day. I get overwhelmed when I think about the fact that I'm supposed to be drinking 8 glasses of water and eating 4 servings of vegetables and having 30 minutes of anaerobic exercise every day. And I also should be, why don't I pick up trash while I'm on my walk so I can be contributing to my community? All of these things that I think are good things feel incredibly overwhelming when you're in a mental health space where even showering feels like a feat. So I have found that just sitting outside, I don't have a porch, but just on this like little slab of concrete in the morning, just letting the wind touch my skin and like the sunlight hit me in the eyes, I don't have my phone, I don't have a book, I'm literally just sitting there. Sometimes my mind is going a mile a minute, as it always does. Sometimes I can just kind of like breathe and like space out for a bit, but I would highly recommend just stepping 2 feet outside your door every day if you can, when the weather is nice, of course. I understand that I live in the South, so not everybody has that option. But as someone who lives in a basement apartment that gets very little natural sunlight, I really, really, really appreciate the fact that I do live in a place that has weather that is temperate enough that I can sit outside and get some of that sun. So I don't know where else I'll be filming for the rest of the week. I don't know if I'm gonna have time to start another book today. You may see me again in this outfit and in this place, but I just wanted to check in on my reading, but also on myself. So I will talk to you later. I will see you in the next clip. Good morning. Welcome back to this adventure. My cat is laying in the one patch of sunlight at my feet, so if you hear any scuttering about, that's Sinatra. Today we're going to be talking about Who Moved My Cheese, which is the second book that I am reading on this weekly challenge vlog. So far it's not going great because technically I'm one day behind, and also I enjoyed this book less than I enjoyed Enemy Pie, so let's get into it. Calling it a book is kind of like, because it's about 45 pages, so a novella, maybe a short story more likely. And turns out that although there are mice in the story, which I mentioned in one of my other videos, the story actually involves two mice and two little people who all have different reactions to roaming around a maze in search of cheese. They find this great supply of it, and then one day, out of nowhere it seems, the cheese disappears. And the way that the two mice, Sniff and Scurry, and the way that the two little people, Hem and Haw, all differently react to this change in lifestyle, this unexpected change in the situation, is supposed to be kind of like a parable, teach a little lesson about embracing change and paying attention to the signs and not spending too much time overthinking, but learning from your mistakes. And it's actually a story within the story. This little fable about the maze and the two mice and the two little people are buttressed by a group of people who went to high school together getting back together at a reunion. And when you start the book, you're hearing about this person's family business and this person's CEO job and this person's beautiful family. And then after the story has been told in the context of this reunion, they start admitting that in various ways, the cheese has been moved in their own lives. Maybe their family business crumbled because they did not pay attention to the competition until it was too late. Maybe they're struggling to figure out the direction for their family after a divorce and helping their children realize that they still love them, but that means things are going to change because their parents no longer love each other. It's one of those things where it's like, it's hard to judge because while I genuinely did not enjoy the writing, like I believe the story could have been written in a more compelling way that did not lean so heavily into the 1-for-1 ratio. Here's a situation between Sniff and Scurry, and here's the parable. I understand why the message has been helpful to some people. When I think about books that really seem to be written for a specific purpose or message as opposed to written for the joy of writing, and this is me making an assumption, I think of things like the Celestine Prophecy and The Alchemist. You go into that book knowing that the reason that book exists is to talk about a larger philosophical truth or a larger way of looking at the world. But in both of those cases, the Celestine Prophecy and The Alchemist, I actually enjoy the storytelling itself. I'm actually invested in the characters. I'm actually feeling tension, feeling moments of tension, feeling moments of fear, feeling moments of hope. And because I'm because I'm fully invested in the characters themselves, I feel that allows me as a reader to more readily and easily accept the message that the book is trying to tell. In Who Moved My Cheese, it feels like it's all message and very little story. So even though, yeah, like logically speaking, can I think of moments in my life where I spent too much time hyper analyzing the situation, and that focus on fear and that focus on getting to the bottom of things led me to be stagnant? Absolutely. So I can say that I recognize some of my own flaws in some of the characters in this book. And by reading about how they, went through the maze and found their cheese and overcame their fear, of course that means in theory, I could apply their lessons to my own life. But that doesn't mean it was an enjoyable experience to read. So I love how I say I don't rate books, but when it comes time to talk about a book that I didn't enjoy, suddenly I want to be all about the low stars. This book was, again, less than 45 pages, really easy to read. If you go into it knowing you're like, this is going to be a little story that is going to have a bunch of like key takeaway points at the end of each section, and the goal is to recognize yourself in these characters and see what you can improve in your life, whether that's business or personal, sure, give it a read. It'll take you, probably less than an hour. But if you're looking for a story that is as engaging and compelling and interesting as other fiction stories, while also on top of that having a good message, I wouldn't really recommend this. I think they veered too far into the let me make sure this says exactly what I need it to say, and did not spend enough time on why do I care about these group of people who have come back together for a high school reunion? Why do I care about these two mice or these two little people? I'm not even asking oh, why is there a world in which a maze exists in which two mice can speak and also interact with two human beings the size of mice and they both hunt for cheese? Like, I'm not saying it needs to be realistic. I'm not saying they need to, explain the plot holes. Who built the maze? Like, this isn't Maze Runner. I'm not talking about that. But I believe that there are ways to tell the exact same messages the story is trying to tell in a way that is more embracing, like honoring of the act of storytelling itself, if that makes sense. So that's the second book I read as part of this week. Next, we have The Curious Incident of the Dog in Nighttime, which was Childish Gambino / Donald Glover's pick. That one I'm really excited for because after coming out of Who Moved My Cheese, I know it's going to be a story. So I will check back in later. Bye.
Welcome to the country. Y'all are seeing more about my life and background than ever before. So today I actually did finish a book on time, and that was The Curious Incident of the Dog at Nighttime. And I am so glad that this was my third read because I love this book. This is a story of a teenage boy named Christopher who has autism, who is trying to discover the mystery of who murdered a dog in his neighborhood. But throughout the course of trying to figure this mystery out, he learns a lot more about his parents, about the world, about himself. And the ending is not one that is necessarily happy, but it is definitely hopeful. Now, I do have to say that I don't have autism. I currently am not close with anyone who has autism, and the author does not have autism, so I can't really speak to whether or not this is accurate in its portrayal. And also, being mindful of that, I'm sure that there are many people who have different experiences of autism, so I'm sure this is just one. But in the way that we view his mind, see the ways that he processes things like God and time and space, look at the minutia of his daily life and why certain things need to be certain ways, as he's exploring these bigger themes of truth and lying and friendship and family. It is such a good book. And I'm really glad that I read this book before seeing the stage play, because I actually haven't seen the stage play. Like I mentioned in a previous clip, I've read the script because you just get so much more out of it, getting to hear how he processes things inside his mind. Hello, I'm back. I had to go do something with my grandma before I could finish all of my thoughts on The Curious Incident of the Dog in Nighttime. But rewatching that previous clip, I think I hit on all of the really big things that I loved about the book. I also really enjoyed the fact that because Christopher has autism, there are certain times in the book where he's gathering clues and information that he does not yet know how to process. And I, as the reader who's coming at it from a different perspective, I'm like, oh no, Christopher. And then I have to wait until he figures it out on his own. And I'm sure for some people that might be a little odd, being, I don't want to say ahead of the character, but just having more information that the character doesn't yet know how to process. But I found that the staggering of the book in terms of here's a moment that's relevant to this overall plot, here's a time in which Christopher is sharing some information about mathematical problems or about IQ tests or about the way that the universe works. I found that even in those moments that deviated from the main course, the main plot of the story, the lessons that he was sharing in those stories, the ways that he was revealing some of his own personal, I would say, biases and perspectives on how he saw the world would play in the next section when you see him introduced to new concepts or interacting with new people. So I really, really like the way the book was structured in that sense. And similar to Flowers for Algernon, this book is written from Christopher's perspective. It's a first-person narrative, and he talks about what it feels like to be writing a book for the first time as he's experiencing and learning all of these things. Some things that he is glad he now knows, and some things that he probably wish he didn't have to know. So I just really, really enjoyed this book. I'm so glad that this was the third book I read, because after the first two, I was like, okay, is this gonna buoy my mood? Is this something I'm really looking forward to? But it was really, really nice. And kind of checking in a little bit in terms of like feelings and mental health, because I did say I was going to talk about that in another clip. The reason I'm in such a different location is because my grandmother lives alone, and throughout the course of this pandemic, we've been bringing her to live with us, and occasionally we've been coming here to check up on her. Of course, we're doing everything that we need to do in terms of masks and safety and distancing, but I'm only here for a couple of days just checking up on her, and then she won't come live with us again for another few months. And it's been really, really, really nice to be with her, especially because in regards to how I process things when I'm struggling, isolation is the first step. That is something that I cling to. I have been definitely isolating myself from my friends and family, even more so than what is required in a pandemic. So to come here and get to spend some time with my grandma of a different generation, of a different age, who's had her fair share of life experiences, I would love to do some like autobiographical, or not autobiographical, but some biographical work of her one day, because she's had a fascinating life. It's kind of forcing myself to interact with people who I care about and who care about me has been really, really helpful. So I am enjoying that. We have 2 books left on the list. The next one I'm going to read is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And after that, it'll be The Color Purple by Alice Walker. So I will check in later.
Good morning, and welcome back to my week of Black Celebrity Reads. This will be the last clip that you see from me, which is not the original plan, but I'll explain why I made that edit later. So the last book I read was The Color Purple by Alice Walker, and I am so glad that I reread it, because I realized upon reviewing it that I had forgotten a lot of what the key elements of this novel were about, and I had completely conflated my memories of the stage musical with my memories of the book, because there are some major differences. So the book was published in 1982, and it is the story of Celie, who is a Black woman growing up in rural Georgia in the 1930s, and definitely a bunch of content warnings for this book in terms of abuse, in terms of sexual assault. Celie, in her own words, is someone who is poor, Black, and ugly, or at least that's the way that she's been taught to view herself by the world. She has a deep love for her sister, Nettie. She protects her any way that she can. She ends up, and I'm comfortable saying this because I think it's important to know, because if you start the book and you're like, "Ooh, this is heavy," the book has a happy ending. She goes on this journey of self-actualization. She learns to see herself as worthy and as beautiful. She finds new ways to connect with God and religion, which is a point I want to talk about later. She makes real friends. She learns to make her own money. The story is about her, but it's really about a group of women. Her, Shug Avery, Sophia, Squeak / Mary Agnes. There's this whole community of Black folks rooted around the Black women in this story. And there is so much suffering that comes at the hands of interpersonal relationships, but also at the hands of systemic injustices. And you really watch Celie grow and blossom and bloom to the point where she can stand up to the people that are hurting her, where she can strike out on her own and make her own life, where she comes to a sense of inner peace, where she can admit that there may be someone in her life that she will always love, and she'll be appreciative of those times they had together. But if that person never comes back, then she would also be content. It goes through the entire journey of her life, and it's actually written in a series of letters. In the beginning, Celie is writing letters to God, who she feels is the only person that she can speak to. And eventually she starts writing letters to her sister, and you get to see the letters that her sister has written back to her, although you see them in a different timeline because of this really awful betrayal that occurs in regards to the sisters and some other folks. I don't want to give too much away in case you want to read it. As I said, it is a heavy book, but one of the reasons I'm so glad I reread it was because this time I actually did a little bit of research on Alice Walker, which I didn't do the first time I read the book, and I also decided to read the foreword. And hearing in Alice Walker's own words how spirituality and faith and the idea of being one with nature and the universe and the remembering process and self-actualization play such a key role in this book, that was so helpful, because reading it again, I was already picking up on those themes, but hearing some of Alice Walker's intent, and I know in my last video we talked about audience interpretation of authorial intent, was so refreshing because those themes are not present in the musical. You really don't get those key scenes between Shug Avery and Celie when they're talking about the idea of God and why do we always perceive him as being male when he's supposed to not be male or female, and the idea of the white man's religion and the way that religion can be used as a tool to suppress people, but also faith can be used as a tool to uplift people. The role of nature. I mean, the title of the book itself, The Color Purple, is so fun to me because Alice Walker, separately from this book, she is the person who coined the term womanist. And she described feminism is to lavender as womanism is to purple. And there were many Black women activists, educators, theologians, then and now, who identify as womanists as opposed to feminists, because so often feminism has been focused on, has been led by, has been gatekept by white women. Sometimes nowadays you'll hear people say, oh, there's a difference between intersectional feminism and white feminism. Womanism was trying to answer this question many, many years ago. So you have that element in terms of The Color Purple, but also there are various moments in the novel where characters talk about how, can you imagine how upset God would be that he put all this beautiful color purple in the world and you just walk by wrapped up in your own problems and not notice it? Or the idea that the color purple is such a striking, vibrant, rich color. It often evokes royalty and abundance, and it occurs naturally in nature, this very brilliant hue. There's so many different metaphors you can use for the color purple in the book itself, but also looking at Alice Walker's work and looking at that tied into kind of what she was talking about in her foreword about the role of communing with nature it just all seemed to fit really, really beautifully. And something that I found really interesting about this book that ties into why I technically am ending this challenge early is that The Color Purple was published in 1982, and The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which was the other book I was supposed to read, was published in 1997. I actually got about 2 or 3 chapters into that book before I realized that if I was going to finish it within the 1 week time frame I gave myself, I would be doing myself a disservice. I really wanted to kind of sit and meditate on and really reflect on some of the things I was reading, especially because what Tolle was writing, or Tolle, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, at least in these first few chapters, was echoing what I had just read in a fictional context in The Color Purple. And I did not plan this. As I said, I didn't even remember all of these, spiritual metaphysical themes that were in The Color Purple. But to read, about this very famous Oprah certified spiritual teacher talking about X, Y, and Z, and realizing that it feels familiar to me since I have just seen those same principles applied in a conversation between 2 Black women in the 1930s in Georgia, written in a book by a Black woman in the 1980s. It felt very serendipitous, and that made me want to really sit and reflect with The Power of Now more, and sit and reflect with The Color Purple more in relationship to that book, and I just wouldn't be able to do that in the time frame. Booktube, YouTube is a lot of fun. This is my first time doing a challenge and I've enjoyed it, and I really wanted to kind of hold myself to what I said I'd do in the earlier clips. But what is the point of doing all this if I'm going to have a less quality experience, a less impactful experience with the book just for the sake of a video, So sorry if you were expecting me to read all 5 books in 1 week. That was my plan as well. But I'm really glad that I ended up not doing that. And now I'm working my way more slowly through The Power of Now. But if you made it this far into this journey with me, I am so glad that you did. And to end a little bit on mental health, because that is something I've been weaving in throughout this vlog, I also want to point out, in addition to being outside and communing with nature, which unintentionally became a theme in this book, also, even when it feels unnatural, reaching out to family, even if it's not to talk about the thing weighing on you, just to spend time with them like I did with my grandma, that was really helpful. I also don't want to dismiss the value of money. And I don't mean value in terms of economically, but it is a privilege for me to be able to say, I really don't feel like cooking tonight, and I don't have the energy for that because I am so drained. I'm going to order food. Or, I am going to order a pair of socks that I think are really cute because some of the proceeds go to a good cause, and because I look forward to having something arrive in the mail. I don't want to give the impression that money solves all problems, but it certainly makes your living conditions easier, and it certainly makes it easier to get quick bursts of cheap serotonin. So that's probably not the most highbrow philosophical take, money matters. But in looking back at some of my other clips, I realized that I would feel disingenuous if I was talking about certain things that kind of help me process my bad mental health days, bad mental health months. Let's be honest, 2021 has been without acknowledging the role that economic privilege plays in that. So if you are someone like me who is really, really hitting a wall, whether you're counting your year as the first day of quarantine till now, or whether you're someone who's looking at things like calendar years, the past few months, I'm with you. I see you, I feel you, I hear you, I feel for you if you have been in the same position as I am. But I will say that some of the things I've talked about throughout this video, but also the process of doing kind of a longer term video, a longer term project than from what I normally do, has helped. And that makes me feel better, even if only for a brief moment. So as always, I hope you have a good day. I don't know when the next time you'll see me is. I'm trying to challenge myself, but also honor my instincts and the needs that are coming up. But yeah, happy reading.